Greetings. Today I bring to you another Legends of Mythology. Today's episode is a little bit more unique because, as you can tell by the title, I'm actually covering two different gods, but they are, as many know or may not know, closely related. I am doing the gods of the underworld, Persephone and Hades. They reign from the Greek mythology. And they are a husband and wife power duo. Yeah, that's about it for the intro. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. Persephone, also called Kor or Kora, is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter. She became the queen of the underworld through her abduction by Hades, the god of the underworld, with the approval of her father, Zeus. Persephone serves a double function in the Greek pantheon, both by being the queen of the underworld and also the goddess of vegetation. Being predominantly associated with the spring, she was revered by farmers and lovers of plant life. In her purpose as the goddess of vegetation, but in her role as the queen of the underworld, she is often called the dread or dreaded Persephone, within which tradition it was forbidden to speak her name. This tradition comes from her joining with the ancient divinity Despoina, the mistress, whose real name could not be revealed to anyone except those initiated into Despoina's mysteries. As goddess of death, she was also called a daughter of Zeus and Demeter, the river that formed the boundary between the earth and the underworld. In Homer's epics, which Homer is responsible for the Odyssey, she appears always with Hades and associated directly with the underworld, apparently sharing with Hades control over the dead. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus encounters the dread Persephone in Tartarus when he visits his dead mother. Odysseus sacrifices a ram to the death goddess Persephone, and to the ghosts of the dead who drink from the sacrificed animal. In the Reformation of Greek mythology, which was contained in the Ephoric hymns, Dionysus and Melino are separately children of Persephone. Persephone is a true nature child, being the daughter of the goddess of harvest. Her mother is also affectionately known as Mother Nature. Persephone is a living example of youth, beauty, and life, and draws the attention of the king of the dead, not to be confused with the god of death himself, who is actually Thanatos. Hades is the king, death itself is Thanatos. While picking flowers with her companions, Persephone is lured away from the group by the most interesting, beautiful, and sweet-smelling narcissus she has ever encountered, which is actually a flower. As she attempts to gather them, a great chasm opens in the earth, and Hades bears upon her, riding on his monstrous chariot, pulled by magnificent black stallions, where he sweeps her away to the depths of the kingdom of the dead. Demeter looks everywhere for her child, causing mayhem and destruction wherever she goes as grief continues to overwhelm her. At first, Zeus did not see a need to seek out Hades or confront him about the abduction of Persephone. But when Demeter's horrible grief causes her to neglect her duties as a goddess, the earth begins to die, crops perish, animals become barren, and the land becomes cold and lifeless. Zeus goes to his brother and appeals to him, but finds out that the problem is much more complicated than simply demanding her release. The underworld, you see, The underworld has many rules, one of which is that should a mortal consume anything while in the underworld, that mortal can therefore not leave it. Supposedly, unbeknownst to Hades himself, Persephone had swallowed several pomegranate seeds. Zeus is usually very much one for the rules, unless of course it restricts him from getting anything he wants, but as the king of the gods, he always upholds the others. But in this instance, he had to consider the fate of the world over what he wanted. He decreed that Persephone be returned to Demeter for the safety of the world and all of the gods contained in it, and then she and Hades must share time with Demeter. They get 6 months of the year with her each. When Hermes guides her out of the underworld and back to her mother, the earth begins to thaw. The earth experiences spring and summer, while Persephone and Demeter are together. While she is with Hades, the earth feels Demeter's lament during autumn and winter. Persephone is more reasonable and compassionate than her fierce but very fair husband. She causes conflict when she does a favor for Aphrodite. Apparently, the goddess of love had fallen for a beautiful youth, Adonis. When he dies, Aphrodite gives him to Persephone for safekeeping, but the goddess of the dead falls in love with him herself. When she refuses to give him up, Zeus must yet again intervene with a similar resolution. The two goddesses must share him 6 months out of the year. The two goddesses must share him for 6 months out of the year, with Persephone claiming him during the autumn and the winter. However, as time goes on, Adonis chooses Aphrodite, claiming to love her more, and when the time came, he refused to go back with Persephone to her kingdom. Angered and hurt, feeling betrayed, the goddess of the underworld sent a wild boar to kill Adonis, who died in Aphrodite's arms and was transformed into an anemone flower. Another fun little myth that I found: Persephone did not have any children with Hades. Unlike her celestial counterpart Hera, she didn't have any problems with her husband's fidelity either. One of the half exceptions is the story of the nymph Minth, who may have been Hades' mistress before he abducted Persephone. When Minth boasted that she was more beautiful than Hades' new lover, and that she would one day win Hades back, Persephone took care that such a thing should never happen and transformed the nymph into a mint plant. Just a fun little short myth that I found pretty interesting. One of my other favorite myths is one that I found on Pirithous, the king of the Lapiths, attempts to abduct Persephone with the help of his friend Theseus. It didn't go as planned when Hades himself welcomed them with open hospitality, even offering a feast. As soon as they sat at the table, snakes coiled around their feet, holding them in place. As it turns out, anchoring the Lord of the Dead in his own realm was pretty unwise, as Hades chose to forever lock Pirithous in his realm of death for attempting to steal his wife, while Theseus was later rescued by Hercules. Speaking of Hades, I think it's point in the video where we move on to his section. Hades is the god of the dead and the king of the underworld, with which his name becomes synonymous. So there is Hades the god, and there is Hades the place, the kingdom. The underworld is also often referred by the Greeks as Hades. Hades was the eldest son of Cronus and Rhea, although the last son regurgitated by his father. He and his brothers Zeus and Poseidon defeated their father's generation of gods, the Titans, and claimed rulership over the cosmos. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the sky, and Poseidon the sea, with the solid earth, a long provenance of Gaia, available to all three concurrently, however they choose. Hades was often portrayed in many forms of media, statues, and in many ancient drawings with his three-headed guard dog, Cerberus. In Greek mythology, Hades, the god of the underworld, had three older sisters, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, as well as his two younger brothers, Poseidon and Zeus, all of whom were swallowed whole by their father as soon as they were born, for fear that his children would grow up and usurp his throne, which is ironic because that's exactly what they did. Zeus, the youngest child, survived through the machinations of their mother, Rhea. He was the only one to escape this fate. Upon reaching adulthood, Zeus managed to force his father to regurgitate his siblings. After their release, all seven gods, along with the allies they managed to gather, challenged the elder gods for their power. A divine war. The war lasted for over 10 years, ending with victory for the younger gods. Following their victory, according to a famous passage, Hades and his two brothers, Poseidon and Zeus, drew lots for which realms they got to rule. Zeus, of course, again, receiving the sky, Poseidon receiving the sea, and Hades receiving the underworld, the unseen realm through which souls of the dead go upon leaving the world, and all things beneath the earth. Some myths suggested that Hades was dissatisfied with this turnout, but had no choice and moved on to his new realm. However, these, in all of the major ones, such as in Homer's Odyssey, and a lot of the major texts, ancient writings, Hades never resented his role as the god of the underworld and actually often embraced it. Despite modern connections of death being evil, sort of the same thing with the Anubis video is often in popular and media culture. If Hades exists, he's perceived as this evil character that just simply wants the end of the world or wants souls for power or whatever. And just as with Anubis, that is not what Hades stood for. Hades was actually very positively inclined in mythology. Hades was often portrayed as passive, rather than anything close to resembling evil, his role often maintaining as much balance between not only the dead and the living, but the gods themselves. That said, he's also depicted as cold and stern, and he held all of his subjects equally accountable to his laws. So again, just like Anubis, he was just and he was fair. He had rules, and rules had to be followed. He gave no exceptions, whether they be king or peasant, just the same as Anubis gave no exceptions between a pharaoh and a peasant. Any other individual aspects of his personality are not really given much more than, again, cold and stern, and held everyone up to his rules. But even though Greeks refrained from giving him much thought to avoid attracting his attention, Hades ruled the dead, assisted by others whom he had complete authority. The house of Hades, was described as full of guests, though he rarely left the underworld. He cared very little about what happened in the world above, as his primary attention was ensuring that none of his subjects ever left his domain. He strictly forbid his subjects to leave, and would become absolutely outraged if anyone even so much as tried, or if someone tried to steal the souls. His wrath was equally terrible for anyone who tried to cheat death or otherwise crossed him, such as Cepheus and Persephone, who found their sorrow in Hades. While usually indifferent to his subjects, Hades was very focused on the punishment of these two people, particularly Persephone, due to his attempt to steal Persephone for himself, and consequently was forced into the chair of forgetfulness. Another myth about the Greek god Eclipsius, who was originally a demigod, the son of Apollo and Coronis, a Thessian princess. During his lifetime, he became a famous and talented physician who eventually was able to bring the dead back to life. Feeling cheated, Hades persuaded Zeus to kill him with a thunderbolt. After his death, he was brought to Olympus, where he became a god. Hades was only depicted outside of the underworld once in a single myth, and even that is believed to have been an instance where he just left the gates of the underworld, which was when Hercules shot him with an arrow as Hades was attempting to defend the city of Pylos. After he was shot, however, he traveled to Olympus to heal. Besides Hercules, the only other living people who ventured to the underworld were also heroes: Odysseus, Aeneas, Orpheus, to whom Hades showed uncharacteristic mercy at Persephone's insisting, who was moved by Orpheus's music. Theseus with Pirithous, and in a late romance, Psyche. None of them were pleased with what they had witnessed in the realm of the dead. In particular, the Greek war hero Achilles, whom Odysseus conjured a blood libation, saying, "O shining Odysseus, never try to console me for dying. I'd rather follow the plow as thrall to another, one with no land allotted to him and not much to live on, than be king over the dead." The realm of Hades, in most tellings, is misty and gloomy, and absolutely abode of the dead. There was a lot of them. Where all mortals go when they die. Very few mortals could leave Hades once they entered, the exceptions being Hercules and Theseus, which were both Greek heroes. Even Odysseus, in his Odyssey, calls up the spirits of the departed, rather than descend down to them. Later, Greek philosophy introduced the idea that all mortals were judged after death and were either rewarded or cursed. There are several sections of the realm of Hades, including Elysium, the fossil meadows, and Tartarus. The mythograptor Apollodorus describes Tartarus as the gloomiest place in Hades, as far distant from Earth as Earth is from Olympus. Greek mythographers were were not perfectly consistent about the geography of the afterlife. A contrasting myth about it concerns the gardens of the Hesperides, often identified with the Isles of the Blessed, where many Greek heroes dwelled. For Helenus, the deceased entered the world by crossing the river Styx, ferried across by Charon, who charged an obelisk, a small coin for passage, placed in the mouth of the deceased by relatives. Paupers and the friendless gathered for hundreds of years on the near shore, according to book number 6 of Virgil's Aeneid. Greeks offered proprietary libations to prevent the deceased from returning to the upper world to haunt those who had not given them a proper burial. Charon could often be seen as being bribed by receiving an obelisk. In many myths, Charon is actually bribed to take people onto or even across the river Styx. The far side of the river was guarded by Cerberus, a three-headed gargantuan dog, defeated by Hercules. Passing beyond Cerberus, the shades of the departed entered the land of the dead to be judged. The 5 rivers of the realm of Hades and their symbolic meanings are the Acheron, the river of sorrow or woe; Cactius, the river of lamentation; Ptheklion, the river of fire; Lethe, the river of oblivion; and Styx, the river of hate, the river upon which even the gods swore, and in which Achilles was dipped to render him invincible. The river Styx forms the boundary between the upper and lower worlds. The first region of Hades, after crossing the river Styx and passing the monstrous Cerberus, comprised of the fields of Asphodel, described in the Odyssey, where the shades of heroes wandered despondently among lesser spirits who twittered around them like bats. Only libations of blood offered to them in the world of the living can reawaken them for a short time to the sensations of humanity. Beyond that lay Erebus, which could be taken for a euphemism of Hades himself, whose own name was simply Dread. There were 2 pools, that of Lethe, where the common souls flocked to erase all their memory of humanity and be reborn, and the pool of Mnemosyne, or memory, where the initiates of the mysteries drank instead. In the forecourt of the palace of Hades and Persephone sit the 3 judges of the underworld, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. There, at the trivium sacred to Hecate, where 3 roads meet, souls were judged, returned to the fields of Asphodel if they were neither virtuous nor evil, sent to the road of Tartarus if they were said to be evil, or sent to Elysium with the blameless and blessed heroes, also known as the Islands of the Blessed. That's where you wanted to go. Both god and goddess of the underworld were both revered and feared by all, fiercely loyal to each other, saving each other, and convincing each other of many different things on many different myths. Unbelievably powerful in their own right. They were king and queen. They were rulers of death themselves. Both god and goddess of the underworld were both revered and feared by all. Fiercely loyal to each other and unbelievably powerful. They were king and queen